I'm really surprised at how well the Star Fox Assault tier list video went. It's the highest viewed video on my channel that isn't a first impressions of a game that I didn't review in the end, a fan support chain from a fan-made version of a fan-made Fire Emblem game, wrap your head around that one, or a damn challenge video that had no editing or commentary. This thing is going to curse me forever, isn't it? Nah, but in all honesty, I appreciate the love and support these videos get no matter what. And to celebrate that the Star Fox video got as many views as it did, and definitely not because I planned it beforehand, I'm going to create a tier list of the multiplayer maps this time. Why not playable characters? Because all you need to know is that Wolf and Crystal are broken, and that Slippy and Pippi are wastes of space. Now then, how am I going to rank these 16 maps this time around? Well, first of all, I'm going to judge them mostly for what they have to offer. For instance, I'm not going to rank an on-foot map poorly just because I don't like how the on-foot combat works. That's just an example. I love the gameplay on foot. The credentials for a fun map are a bit more complicated, but the general layout is a big one to consider. Not only for on-foot battles, but also for R-Wing battles when applicable. What's also important is that it's just flat-out fun. I will bring passing mentions to spawn points, but it won't come up a whole lot because they're generally pretty unfair. Lastly, aesthetics and music are there for bonus points. Also, I should mention that I played this with two good friends of mine, but their opinions didn't contribute too much to the ranking. So with that said, it's probably not a big surprise that the simple maps aren't getting a high grade from me. And yes, I'm covering them all in one segment. Why? Well, for one thing, they all have the same music and I don't want to bother finding other songs to play over them. And secondly, there's just not a whole lot to talk about. Like, Simple Map 1 and 2 are both going into C because they're just boring maps with 4 basic structures. I guess if I had to pick one over the other, it would be 2 because it's a smidge more interesting. But the aesthetics of the place isn't interesting, the layout is open and bare with insanely large boundaries, and it's just overall not all that much fun. Simple Map 3, however, gets a bit more favorable grade to me because the layout is pretty distinct. As one of the few on-foot only battle maps, it's unique in that sense, as well as just being a confined area of battle. It makes for short firefights that don't overstay their welcome, and it can lead to some good fun. Also, surprisingly, the spawn points aren't too bad here. Simple Map 4 blows. It's R-Wing and Landmaster only, which, if you do a Landmaster battle here, you're insane. The layout is not made for them whatsoever, and our group didn't even bother playing it that way. And if it's just R-Wings, it's a boring cross made from 4 towers and the bridges. And lastly, Simple Map 5 is pretty okay. It's way too huge, but with how big the central structure is, it's unlikely for you to want to go outside of its vicinity. And the actual tower itself is fun to traverse through, despite its simplicity. Also, bonus points for the very top area that you can only get to on foot with Slippy and Pippi, giving them a unique advantage you rarely see with their jump heights. And just to mention it, the music is really damn nice for these maps. Overall, a solid map. But now we can get to the actual maps that are based off of real locations. Surprise surprise, I'm ranking Katina in S again, and I'm not sorry for it. The first thing you hear as soon as you enter the map is its bombastic intro, with the whole song continuing that feeling of a fun party shooting game. I can't describe it in any other way than just magical. To get to the actual map, I will say that the spawn points are straight up ass, like turn 90 degrees left or right to get a pot shot on your opponent sort of ass. But once everyone is away from each other, this whole dust yard is so much fun to traverse through. Unlike the story mode version of this map, the places where you need to take an elevator to get to are wide open, making the layout have a lot more variance than you would initially think. Not to mention that the different vehicles feel pretty well balanced in this map, and aren't too frustrating to control. The item drops are also pretty well balanced as well. What more is there to say? This planet is aces no matter what Star Fox game you're playing. Just one more fun little thing, these satellites are funny to shoot down. Just make sure you're nice and secluded before you go for it, otherwise you'll eat some shots from your friends. Continuing the lack of surprises, the Outer Sargasso map is pretty bleh. It's R-Wing only, which I just have to say all these maps don't have much quality to them. But this one is the worst of them all, with this structure's way too big out in the middle of the map and trying to find one of your enemies becomes more of a chore than anything. If that wasn't bad enough, the outer circle is pretty wide open as well, so you can't even distance yourself away from the hideout or else the matches will take forever. Words can't describe how boring the matches are in this map. So I have the same things to say about the inner area, right? Considering how much I really didn't like it in the story mode, I actually really like this map in multiplayer. For one thing, the elevator to the top of the base is always activated, so it's never much of an issue getting back up. Even if you don't take the elevator, boxes and enemies that were in the story mode are no longer there, so that traversal is smooth and fun. So with my main complaints about the mission completely gone, what more is there to say? Not all that much, really. The map just thrives in a multiplayer environment with access to higher ground, jetpacks, making cool snipes that I never could. Okay, wait, this reminds me that I really fucking hate how you can't exit the sniper if you're getting shot. So if you're zoomed in and an opponent is right next to you, you're fucked. Whatever, this map is just fun. Next up, we arrive in the cold frostlands of Fichina, and this map has a little bit of good and bad. For one thing, I adore the music here. It perfectly fits the cold weather and landscape. And when it comes to R-Wing only battles, the layout is actually pretty nice. It's large, but not overly huge to where you can never find your opponents. Not to mention there are plenty of overpasses to maneuver around. So what's wrong with it? Ground battles. I categorize this place in 3 sections. The base in the middle, the area just outside the base, and the places outside of the mountains. On ground battles, the areas are way too large and way too unbalanced for my liking. Most of the weapons are in the base, but going down there immediately is either risky, as the opponent on the other side could go right in the middle as well, or you could be unlucky and spawn on the side that doesn't have a doorway, or lucky considering you're likely to find vehicles on the outside as well. And what about beyond the mountains? Absolutely nothing. So if you get shot down over there, you have a long walk to find anything useful. The map is way too segmented for its own good, so sadly I can't give it a better ranking than B. Surprise surprise, I'm putting Sauria in S again. Can you blame me though? Sauria is still as beautiful and fun to traverse as always. Not to mention the music is still wonderful. It reminds me a little bit of Super Monkey Ball for some reason. Either way, what's different with the map? Well, some spaces are a bit more closed off. I don't think there's a single place in the multiplayer map where you can actually go below ground though. But I'm perfectly fine with it. Doing that might have dragged out matches for far too long. Instead, the battles take place up above on the surface, with landscapes and terrain varying quite a lot. High areas with bridges to go between major segments, a lower area with nice weapons and vehicles at the cost of watery terrain to slow you down, and heck, you can go on top of the buildings to try to snipe people. Air battles are also pretty fun. The space above is a little empty, but the bottom has some nice arches to fly under. It's a simplistic map for fun, but not bad in the slightest. In fact, I think a lot of R-Wing maps suffer from being too complicated in the first place. What more is there to be said? Sauria is amazing no matter what mode you play. Corneria is interesting, but I think overall it gets an A rank. I think Corneria has a wonderful layout for versus mode, minus the starting areas, which are by far the worst in the game. It is just also flat out the best map for R-Wing battles, as it's pretty huge with tons of fun terrain to fly around. Actually, that does bring me to my one issue with the map, which is its size. On one hand, it allows for some fun plays to be made regarding areas to try to snipe enemies, or keep advantageous positions. With the size being so big, it gives you one of the most unique layouts of any stage in the game. But on the other hand, this makes matches go on for a very long time. And I mean a very long time. Sadly, that does bump it down to A, despite everything else the stage does right. Oh, and I'm not the biggest fan of the music. Now I go back to the Orbital Gate, and I would actually give it the best ranking of the pure R-Wing maps, which is sad because it still only gets a B rank. But why is that? Well, for one thing, I find the layout to be way too big on both a horizontal scale and a vertical scale. There is the argument that losing an enemy allowing them to restock can be exciting for both sides, but I myself don't find it to be all that fun. Despite its huge size, the layout is actually very nice. It's not like the Sargasso base, where there's just a giant structure in the middle with nothing else. It's wide open with a lot of variance in different parts of the map. Though it also has some of the worst item spawns in the game. Staying near the bottom pretty much guarantees anything you would need to start your assault. The music is nice, if not very standout, and there's not a whole lot more to say about it. Now the Aperoid City, which is so much better as a multiplayer map than as a single player map. To be fair, that isn't a very high bar to clear, but there are genuinely things to like about it. For one thing, they cut out a bunch of the map itself, with the buildings you could enter in the single player no longer being there, and can I just say thank God? Having a map that was as huge as the asteroid city in the campaign would be a nightmare. Instead, we get a more unique layout of, I think, 3 plates surrounding one big center, which lends itself a lot more for a multiplayer map, even if it's still a little too big for my liking. The people that I played with all agreed that we didn't get a full feel of the map, and we especially didn't get a good feel for island battles. Because of this, I can only afford it a B, because I'm not even the most positive about this map. I don't hate it, but it doesn't wow me either. Now we get to the multiplayer unique maps that aren't the simple maps. Because I don't want to end on a meh ending, I'm changing up the order a little bit to talk about the Great Fox first. Let me go over the positive. The music and the theming is amazing, and... oh, we're done. Well then, let's just get it over with. The map is way too huge. I didn't count, but it felt like 10 seconds before we even got to the center of the map to properly duke it out. Then after that, what do we have? Way too much open space with a structure in the middle that takes way too long to go around. I understand it's supposed to be the scope that it is because it's, you know, the Great Fox, but could we have at least gone a little bit faster in the ROing to make it at least fun? It isn't as bad as the Sargasso place because, like I said before, the music and theming is great, but also because the layout is simple enough. You're essentially battling each other near a giant jack piece. It's nowhere near as confusing as the Sargasso place, and nowhere near as boring. But it's still boring enough to land in C tier. Next we have Titania, which I actually have a big soft spot for, which is surprising because the map does a lot of things I usually don't like, and it's a returning planet from Star Fox 64, which was easily the worst planet in the game. So what's so different here? Well, for one thing, I find this place to be gorgeous. I don't know why, but the barren wasteland feels so much more warm and comforting than it looked like in 64. It might be the colors, or the little sprinkles of life, such as cute little huts near the edge of the map and fossils of unknown origin. And the center also has this little radio tower that you could infer is similar to what we repaired in Fichina in the story mode. This map has a lot of charm to it despite the size being way too huge. And the layout in the more confined area is pretty solid too, being a lot more vertically aligned than most maps, which adds a lot of fun play with vehicles and weapons. Also, the music is pretty calming and fitting of the desert feel. I have to give it an A, I really can't help myself. Now, are you guys ready? Because now we get to talk about the shittiest map in the game. I may be giving it a D right now, which it rightfully deserves. But part of me legitimately loves this map. Let's get into it first. First of all, great music, and I adore how the entire map looks. It's goddamn gorgeous. Now, what's wrong with this place? It's super small, which, hey, isn't that bad because it makes fights go faster, right? And I would be inclined to agree with most of the map being pretty competently made. But there are 2 major issues holding it back. For one thing, this place has a lot of places to fall off and die. Not that big of a deal, we had this before back in Sauria and Corneria. The difference is that it's rare to die like that in those maps. With Zonus, you're going to lose most of your lives this way. The bridges are way too damn tight, which means that if you're playing as anyone other than Slippy and Peppy, you're likely going to careen right off the damn edge. And toxic waste below is everywhere. You can't go 5 seconds without there being 8 different ways to dive off and into your death. It's slightly better with the jetpacks, but if you get hit, you're falling straight down, and likely to death. Other issue is the slow-ass elevators. Do you want to go up to the higher floors? Well, you can either go into the main tower to get to the 2nd floor, and only the 2nd floor, or you have to ride elevators up to the other 2 towers, which takes forever. Now, the area doesn't get blocked off if the elevator isn't on your floor, so what does this mean? If you aren't extraordinarily careful when going in, you can die just like that. There is no bottom flooring, just a bunch of disgusting water. So what happens if you're getting chased and need a quick exit? You're doing a coin flip. There are also these little cubbies with items in the elevator, and if you go in from the elevator going up, you'll have to either sit there for a while or take a leap of faith, none of which are fun. So with all that said, If this is easily the worst map in the game, why do I love it? Because it's fucking hilarious, okay? This is by far one of the silliest maps in the game with how incompetently designed it is. That kind of just comes around to being really funny to laugh about. So physically, it's going in D, but in my heart, it's S+. And there we have it. If you want me to rank the characters, here. Okay, that's enough Star Fox for me for the moment. I got some larger projects cooking in the background, so I'll likely put in some ranty-like content before I get those out. Until then, give Star Fox Assault multiplayer a try, and have a good night, I guess.